Whoa, legendary!
What is up, guys? Welcome to another Top 5 with Kris05. Today I want to give you 5 decks that are great for climbing Legend in March. Keep in mind that it's not a great idea to craft expensive decks right now, since we are very close to the rotation. So I will try to give you a few really good decks that are a bit expensive, and a few decks that are cheaper but still good. I want to give you guys a huge thank you for always being here and watching my videos, and I would really appreciate it if you drop a like and subscribe if my videos helped you. Also, if you want to see my new setup in action, make sure to check me out on Twitch as well. Now let's see the decks. The first deck on the list is on the expensive side, but is one of the most effective decks to climb to Legend with right now, Death Rattle Hunter. It is very easy to snowball the game out of control with this deck, and your opponents will always be wondering if they should or shouldn't crack those eggs, especially on turn 5 when cubes are in range. The deck is not too amazing against most aggro decks, but as long as you don't draw too poorly, it should be close to an even fight for you. Here's what the matchups look like. These are the stats from Vicious Syndicate. Overall, it's doing pretty well against most popular decks, except for Odd Paladin, and that is why you might want to tech in some more early game, but we will talk about that in just a bit. Even Paladin and Pirate Miracle Rogue are also on the harder side, but if you high roll, it doesn't matter what you're playing against, and that happens more often than you would think. The deck has quite a few tech slots as well, so you can be very versatile depending on what you're seeing the most. You can include an Erubian Unraveler if you're seeing too many combo and spell heavy decks, or you can use Defender of Argus and even Dark Creeper if you're in an aggro heavy meta. Deadly Shots can help you against those wall priests, and so on. You just have to be creative and figure out what gives you the most problems, so you tech better against that. For the mulligan, Kelset and an egg should always be a keep for you. If you already have an egg, you should keep a Death Rattle trigger as well. Versus slower matchups, you want to keep Rexar, and some sites even suggest Kathrina. And against aggro matchups, you want Defender of Argus, Candleshot Bow, and maybe even a Flanking Strike. Overall, I strongly advise you against crafting this deck if you're missing a lot of the cards, since you will have only a month to enjoy it. But if you have no dust issues and climbing is your only goal, this is one of your best choices. If you prefer keeping your dust, Midrange Beast Hunter should be able to do the trick for you for just a fraction of the cost. The games with it are faster, and you should still be able to push the Legend with it, even though it's not as easy with it as before. This video should still give you a good idea on how you can pilot the deck. Next we have Even Paladin, which again is not a cheap deck by any means, but at least it includes Gen, which you would want to have anyway for the extra Hall of Fame dust. By the way, if you still don't know how to gain the most dust out of the Hall of Fame, you might want to check out my last 2 videos on that matter. Anyway, with Even Paladin, you have access to Silverhand recruits for only 1 mana, which turned out to be a lot stronger than most people expected back in the day. Your enemies will always want to keep your board clear, but that is a lot easier said than done. Usually, you will be able to swarm the board early on, and if you manage to stick a Corpse Taker early, your opponent will be in a very difficult position. If that doesn't happen, you have more than enough mid-game to seal the deal later on. Your matchups are looking quite nicely in the current meta, where only even luck can be considered somewhat of a problem. But Odd Paladin ain't no picnic too, but it's still close to an even matchup. With this deck, you have about 4 tech slots you can play around with. You already have a strong weapon destruction tech in there, so you can fit some silence, some AoE, and maybe Mojo Master Zihi, since it can postpone your opponent's combo or hard late game and give you a few more turns to finish the job. It's up to you to decide what you want to tech in, depending on what you seem to have most problems with. For the mulligan, you want to curve out nicely on turn 2, so look for a Berserker or a Hydrologist. Keeping a Corpse Taker is always a good idea, and Blessing of Kings almost always sees value on turn 4. Consecration should always be helpful against aggro matchups, and True Silver might be useful too, but as long as you get a couple of 2 drops early on, you should be good. Again, it won't be a smart choice to craft this deck this soon to a rotation if dust is an issue for you, but the power of the deck can't be denied. If you prefer something cheaper, Secret Paladin and Odd Paladin might be the better choices for you. Those 2 are still very strong choices, and you should have no problems climbing ranks with them. Next, we have a cheaper and yet effective deck, the good old Zoolock. This deck archetype is as old as the game itself, but it's still kicking butts in 2019, and I'm pretty sure that's not gonna change anytime soon. The deck has always been cheap and simple to build, and it was never too complicated to pilot as well, even though in the current meta you will need a lot of skill to climb smoothly with it. Your goal early on is to swarm the board with your cheap stuff and do value trades while building your board. Your hero power guarantees you never run out of resources, and the deck has quite a lot of reach and burst too, so your opponent will never feel too safe against you, except for Warrior. Your matchups look something like this. Nothing is too polarized, but warriors and control mages will give you headaches. Anything else is even or in your favor, so the climb shouldn't be too hard for you, if you know what you're doing with the deck. Zoolock is very versatile, and you can switch a ton of cards and still keep the same archetype. Currently, this is the top rated deck on HS Replay for Zoolock, but you can even build it cheaper, swapping out Leroy for a Doomguard. The Solarium seems like a good inclusion in the deck, but some people are finding more success with the deck without it, and it makes for a cheaper deck too, so if you don't have Solarium, it's probably best not to craft it for now. You can tech in a Void Ripper as well, if Wall Priest is problematic for you. For the mulligan, you always keep Kelly, Flame Imp and Cobalt Librarian, no questions asked. Against aggro, Voidwalker and Dark Reaper are amazing, and keeping Happy Ghoul for an early board swing is worth it most of the time as well. Nothing special you can do against control, just hope you can swarm the board faster and more frequently than they can remove it. In conclusion, I think this deck is okay to craft if you want to climb ranks and don't want to spend a ton of dust in the process. Also, a lot of the cards will remain usable after the rotation too, and the ones that rotate are cheap anyway, so you will not lose too much out of this deal. The archetype will remain in many more expansions to come, even though a lot of the cards will change. If you want to increase your odds of climbing, then Even Luck might work out better for you, but it costs a lot more than this one, so choose wisely. Now let's look at every aggro player's favorite opponent, Odd Warrior. What? You don't like playing against Odd Warrior? Shocker. All jokes aside, Odd Warrior is on the rise again, whether we like it or not, and it's smashing ranks again. It is very effective in the current meta, but it does have a lot of polarized matchups, which we will discuss in a bit. What you do with the deck is armor up, control, clear and repeat, and in about 20 to 60 minutes you should have a win on your hands and a very happy opponent. Personally, I hate playing against this deck myself, and I'm not a big fan of it either, but the deck is strong and it has the numbers to back it up. Here's what the matchups look like. If you're against a Megatune Druid or Warlock, you might just want to concede right away. It's literally the worst two matchups for you, and Mill Druid comes to a close second. Other hard but winnable matchups are against Big Mage, Death Rattle Hunter and Quest Warrior, as well as Control and Q-Block, but anything else is either even or very much in your favor. If you're sick of losing to aggro, this is the way to go. Not too many tech slots here, but if you want to include something, cutting one Rover and one Ysera shouldn't hurt you that much, even though they are great cards. On the mulligan, you always want your Rover, unless you're playing against a Priest. Shield Slam and Reckless Flurry are also great keeps, especially against aggro. And against more control-oriented decks, Dr. Boom will give you a lot of bang. Get it? Never mind. Again, this is a hella expensive deck, but at least most of its cards won't rotate out, even though Baku is a goner. If you're a Warrior fan, you should find use of the rest of the cards somewhere in the future, so it will not be a complete waste to craft this deck right now. Odd Quest Warrior is also a great option for climbing, but since the quest is rotating, the quest list Odd would be the wiser choice for the moment. Even if you don't enjoy the deck on ladder, it would be valuable for you to know how to play the deck and how to play against it. And you can even use it in tournaments, such as the ones World of Duels make each weekend, and you can earn cash like that for free. So make sure to check them out. Link is in the description. And for the last deck for this top 5, we have the deck everyone hates losing to, Wall Priest. I'm not gonna lie, I absolutely hate losing to this deck, so I decided to use it myself, and that is how I reached Legend last season for 12 months in a row. Last month it was super easy, but nowadays the deck is not performing as great as it did before, and people are aware of most of its tricks, but it's still a great deck to climb with. You just want to survive early on with it, and stick a fat taunt which can OTK your opponent with a sneaky combo. It's really awkward playing against, and you can even OTK your opponent with his own big dude, as long as it has 3 attack or less. Your only true counter is Malagos Rogue, but there aren't too many of those on ladder right now, so you should be good. Any other matchup has 40% plus win rate for you, so it should be smooth sailing for you, and you have quite a few 70+% win rate matchups to top it off. There aren't too many tech slots in the deck, but some people swap out Divine Hymn, Lich King and even Ziliax for Shadow Word Death or even more heal and silence. On the mulligan, keeping Northshire Cleric is never a bad idea. Against aggro decks, you want Dark Reaper and your Bear early on, and against control, keeping Oakheart helps a lot. And you might want to keep your Inner Fire or Topsy too, so you have one less spell in your deck to pull from Shadow Visions, and you might get an early lethal like that as well. Overall, there are a lot of little tips and tricks that distinguish the good from the Great Wall Priest player, so you will need a lot of games to get the hang of everything. Again, this deck is not worth crafting so close to the rotation, but it's really good and different from your usual decks, so you still might want to try it out. Control Priest and Clone Priest are still very good options too, so if you have most of the cards for those two, by all means use them and you will still be able to climb a ton. And I think that about wraps it up for this video, guys. I hope this helps you climb a lot in the last full season of the Year of the Raven. Make sure to visit World of Duels and you might end up more prepared for the new expansion than you expected. Thanks for watching, I'm Kris05 and I'll see you in my next video.